for words. That's all it took to change everything. December 26, 1944. A phone rings at Allied Supreme Headquarters. On the other end, General George S. Patton speaks for words that Eisenhower wasn't supposed to hear for another week. "We're through to Bastogne." Eisenhower freezes. His staff watches in stunned silence as the Supreme Commander of Allied forces does something they've never seen before. His eyes fill with tears. But here's what nobody tells you about this moment. What Eisenhower said next, and what he wrote in the hours that followed, revealed a secret he'd been keeping for months. A secret about Patton that would have destroyed both their careers if it ever got out. See, Eisenhower had been covering for Patton, protecting him, making excuses to Washington when Patton went off script. And now, in this single phone call, Eisenhower would finally know if that gamble was worth it. And the most dangerous part, Patton had no idea. Welcome to History of World War II, where we uncover the untold stories behind history's most defining moments. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. We drop deep dive stories every week that your history teacher never told you. Now, here is a question to think about as we dive in. What would you say to someone who just did the impossible? To understand why that phone call mattered so much, we need to go back 7 days to the moment when everything fell apart. December 16, 1944. The Ardennes Forest. American soldiers are half asleep in their foxholes. Most of them are replacements. Green troops, kids who've never fired a shot in anger. The brass has put them here because the Ardennes is supposed to be quiet. A rest sector. At 5:30 a.m., the forest explodes. 2,000 German artillery pieces open fire simultaneously. The ground shakes. Trees splinter. Snow turns red. And out of the mist come 250,000 Wehrmacht soldiers, supported by 1,000 tanks. Hitler's last desperate gamble. Operation Wacht am Rhein. The offensive that would become known as the Battle of the Bulge. Hitler himself designed this attack. He overruled his generals, who thought it was madness. He ignored the fuel shortages, the depleted ranks, the complete Allied air superiority that would return the moment the clouds cleared. None of that mattered. Hitler was betting everything on one massive stroke. If he could reach Antwerp, capture the Allied supply port, split the British and American armies apart, maybe, just maybe, he could force a negotiated peace. It was insane. But on that frozen December morning, it was working. Within hours, the American line doesn't just bend, it shatters. Entire divisions evaporate. Communication lines go dead. Commanders have no idea where their men are. Some units surrender. Others are simply ... gone. Swallowed by the forest and the fog and the endless German columns pouring through gaps that were unsupposed to exist. And right in the center of it all sits a tiny Belgian crossroads town that nobody outside the military had ever heard of. Bastogne. Why does this tiny town matter so much? Because 7 major roads converge at Bastogne. Whoever controls those roads controls the entire Ardennes. The Germans take Bastogne. Their panzers have a clear shot to Antwerp, to the coast, to splitting the Allied armies in two and potentially winning the war. But there's a problem. A big one. The only American forces close enough to hold Bastogne are 11,000 lightly armed paratroopers from the 101st Airborne Division. They have no tanks, limited artillery, winter uniforms that haven't arrived. Some men are fighting in summer boots in below-zero temperatures. These aren't fresh troops. The 101st had jumped into Normandy on D-Day. They'd fought through Operation Market Garden in Holland. They'd been pulled off the line to rest and refit when the German offensive hit. Rest, that's what they were supposed to be doing. Instead, they were loaded onto trucks in the middle of the night and rushed toward a place most of them had never heard of. And they're about to be surrounded by 45,000 German soldiers. Back in Paris, Eisenhower receives the reports. Each one worse than the last. He paces his headquarters, chain-smoking, trying to make sense of the chaos. This is the largest German offensive since 1940, the biggest battle American forces have ever fought. And right now, they're losing. Eisenhower does the only thing he can. Kay calls an emergency meeting. Now, imagine you're in that room. The weight of the free world on your shoulders. Your armies are being torn apart. Thousands of men are dying every hour. The newspapers back home are already printing stories about possible Allied defeat. What do? Eisenhower was about to find out if there was anyone who could save this disaster. And he was about to get an answer he never expected. December 19, 1944. Verdun, France. The war room is cold. The radiators can't keep up with the December freeze seeping through stone walls. Senior Allied commanders file in, their breath visible in the frigid air. The atmosphere is funeral. Eisenhower stands at the head of a long table covered with maps. His face is gray. He hasn't slept in 2 days. But when he speaks, his voice is steady. The present situation is to be regarded as one of opportunity for us and not of disaster. The other generals shift uncomfortably. Opportunity. With the German army tearing through their lines. Then Eisenhower asks a question that will define the next week. How soon can someone attack north to relieve Bastogne? Silence. The generals exchange glances. They're calculating logistics in their heads. Troop movements, supply lines, weather conditions. The math doesn't work. Moving an entire army in winter would take weeks. Then one voice cuts through the silence. December 22nd, 3 divisions. Every head turns. George S. Patton is leaning back in his chair, a faint smirk on his face. Ivory-handled revolvers on his hips. Polished riding boots gleaming despite the mud outside. The room goes cold. December 22nd is 3 days away. Patton's Third Army is currently engaged in heavy fighting 100 miles to the south. To attack north toward Bastogne, he would need to disengage from active combat, pivot his entire force 90 degrees, move over 100 miles through blizzard conditions, and launch a coordinated assault. In 72 hours, it's impossible. Every officer in that room knows it. Eisenhower stares at Patton. These two men have known each other for decades. Served together, fought together, nearly destroyed each other's careers. Eisenhower knows exactly who he's dealing with. A brilliant general who'd once slapped 2 shell-shocked soldiers and nearly got sent home in disgrace. A tactical genius with the ego of a Roman emperor. A man who makes promises as easily as he breathes. Eisenhower leans forward. His voice drops. "Don't be fatuous, George." The words hang in the air. Other commanders might have backed down, apologized, recalculated. Not Patton. He reaches into his jacket and pulls out a sheaf of papers. Contingency plans, 3 of them. Each one detailing exactly how Third Army would pivot north under different scenarios. He'd prepared them before the Germans even attacked. Before anyone else saw what was coming. "I've done the planning, Ike. This isn't a promise. It's a fact." The room is silent. Even Eisenhower is momentarily speechless. Patton had anticipated this crisis, prepared for it. When everyone else was caught flat-footed, he was ready. The other generals stare at those plans in disbelief. Some of them shake their heads, others mutter under their breath. This is classic Patton. Showboating, grandstanding, making promises he can't keep. But Eisenhower sees something else. He sees a commander who is thinking ahead, who was prepared for disaster when everyone else was celebrating victories that hadn't been won yet. But could he actually deliver? Stay with me, because what happens next is one of the most audacious military maneuvers in history. If you're finding this fascinating, drop a like. Eisenhower makes his decision. "All right, George, you've got your chance." But then he adds something else, something the other generals don't hear. He pulls Patton aside, and according to witnesses, his voice turns ice cold. "If you can't deliver this, if those paratroopers are lost because you promised what you couldn't achieve, there will be consequences. No more second chances. Patton meets his eyes. I'll be there, Ike. Count on it. What happens next shouldn't be possible. Within hours of the Verdun meeting, Patton is back at his headquarters. He picks up a telephone and speaks one sentence to his corps' commanders. Execute Plan 2. That's it. 2 words. Because everything else is already prepared. The machinery of war groans into motion. Picture this. Tens of thousands of soldiers who have been fighting for weeks suddenly get new orders. In the middle of the night, in a blizzard, they have to break contact with the enemy they're currently engaging, turn around, and march north. Some units haven't slept in days. Some haven't had a hot meal in a week. The logistics alone are staggering. Every unit needs new maps, new objectives, new radio frequencies, new supply routes. It's not just turning around. It's reorganizing an entire army while it's still in motion. It doesn't matter. Convoys of trucks stretch for miles, headlights cutting through the swirling snow. Tanks churn through mud that sucks at their treads. Artillery pieces are hitched and unhitched and hitched again as roads become impassable. The temperature drops to 20 below zero. Fuel freezes in the tanks. Men's hands stick to frozen metal, but they keep moving. Military police work around the clock, directing traffic at intersections that become nightmares of congestion. Engineers repair bridges that collapse under the weight of tanks. Supply officers perform miracles, rerouting fuel and ammunition to units that have changed direction overnight. Men collapse from exhaustion. Vehicles break down and are pushed off the road. Some units march 50 miles in 22 hours, in a blizzard, in combat gear, knowing they're marching toward a fight, not away from one. Patton himself is everywhere. His command car races from unit to unit, pushing, encouraging, threatening. He stands at crossroads, personally directing traffic. He walks among his men, reminding them what's at stake. Those paratroopers are counting on us. We're not going to let them down. Think about the logistics for a moment. This isn't just soldiers walking from point A to point B. This is moving an entire army. 133,000 men, thousands of vehicles, mountains of ammunition, fuel, food, medical supplies, all while the enemy is actively trying to kill them. All while the weather is trying to kill them too. Military historians still study this movement today. They call it one of the greatest feats of mobile warfare ever achieved, and it almost didn't happen. Meanwhile, in Bastogne, the situation is desperate. The Germans have completed their encirclement. The 101st Airborne is completely surrounded. No supplies can get in. No wounded can get out. Ammunition is running dangerously low. Some units are down to their last clips. The cold is a killer all by itself. Frostbite claims more men every hour. Medical supplies are almost gone. Surgeons operate without anesthesia. Men bite down on leather straps while wounds are cleaned with melted snow. Food is running out. The paratroopers share what little they have with the Belgian civilians who are trapped in the siege with them. Children huddle in cellars, listening to the constant crash of artillery. On December 22nd, the same day Patton promised to attack, German officers approach Bastogne under a white flag. They carry an ultimatum: surrender or be annihilated. The message reaches Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, acting commander of the 101st. He reads it again, then crumples it up. His response becomes one of the most famous words in military history: nuts. The German officers are confused. They don't understand the American slang. An American colonel translates for them. It means, go to hell. The Germans are shocked. They expected surrender. They expected rational men to recognize a hopeless situation. They don't understand. These aren't just soldiers. These are paratroopers. Men who jump out of airplanes into enemy territory. Men who are trained to be surrounded. Men who don't know how to quit. But defiance doesn't stop artillery shells. And every hour that passes, the noose tightens. Where is Patton? Put yourself in those foxholes, surrounded, outgunned, running out of everything. Your only hope is a man 100 miles away, fighting through a blizzard. Would you believe he was coming? December 23rd. Patton does something that would define his legend. The weather is the enemy now. Clouds so thick that Allied aircraft can't fly. Without air support, the Germans have free rein. Without airdrops, Bastogne will starve. Patton summons his chaplain, Colonel James O'Neill. I want a prayer for good weather. I want you to write it. And I want it distributed to every soldier in Third Army. The chaplain is stunned. A prayer for weather. Is Patton serious? Dead serious. The prayer is written that night. 250,000 copies are printed. Every soldier in Third Army receives one. Almighty and most merciful Father, restrain these immoderate rains with which we have had to contend. Grant us fair weather for battle. ... double quotes, what happens next? You can believe or not. On December 24th, Christmas Eve, the skies clear. For the first time in days, the sun breaks through. Allied aircraft roar into the air. Supply planes drop desperately needed ammunition and medical supplies to the paratroopers at Bastogne. Fighter bombers tear into German columns. The C-47 transport planes come in low over the surrounded town. Their cargo doors open. Colored parachutes blossom against the gray sky. Red for ammunition, blue for medical supplies. Green for food. The paratroopers watch from their foxholes, tears freezing on their cheeks. They're not abandoned. Someone is coming. Patton looks up at the sky and says to his chaplain that O'Neill was a mighty fine prayer. Have the man who wrote it report to me. O'Neill pauses. SIRI wrote it. Patton pins a bronze star on him on the spot. We're approaching the moment everything changes. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. But even with clear skies, the battle isn't won. Patton's 4th Armored Division is still fighting toward Bastogne. Every mile is contested. German defenses are dug in deep. Villages become fortresses. Roads become killing grounds. December 25th, Christmas Day. Inside Bastogne, the paratroopers are still holding. Barely. They've been surrounded for 4 days. German attacks come in waves, probing, testing, looking for weakness. The defenders have established a perimeter of foxholes and fighting positions around the town. They've integrated artillery from units that were cut off during the retreat. Tank destroyers have been dug in at key intersections. Every man knows the situation. Every man knows how thin the margins are. One coordinated German assault. One break in the line. That's all it would take. On Christmas morning, the Germans launch their biggest attack yet. Tanks and infantry surge against the southern perimeter. For hours, the outcome hangs in the balance. The 101st holds, barely. Outside Bastogne, the 4th Armored is just 5 miles away. 5 miles that might as well be 500. The Germans know what's coming. They're throwing everything at stopping Patton's tanks. At SHAEF headquarters, Eisenhower waits. He's done everything he can, given orders, allocated resources. Now all he can do is wait for news and wonder if he made the right call trusting George Patton. December 26, 1944, 4:50 p.m. Captain William Dwight peers through the periscope of his Sherman tank. Call sign Cobra King. He's the lead tank of Combat Command Reserve of the 4th Armored Division. Ahead is the village of Eisenhower. Beyond that, somewhere in the smoke and chaos, is Bastogne. His orders are simple. Get through at any cost. The village is crawling with Germans, anti-tank guns, infantry, machine gun nests. Going through Eisenhower is suicide, but going around means more delay. More hours that the paratroopers don't have. More time for the Germans to strengthen their grip. Dwight has been fighting for days. His men are exhausted. His tanks are battered. Fuel is running low. None of that matters now. Dwight gives the order anyway. We're going straight through. Don't stop for anything. Cobra King lurches forward, machine guns blazing. The other tanks follow. The next few minutes are pure chaos. Shells exploding, buildings collapsing, Germans running, Americans dying. The tanks punch through the village like a fist through paper. Infantry from the 53rd Armored Infantry Battalion charge alongside the tanks, clearing buildings, fighting room to room. Every yard is contested. Every second is precious. German 88mm guns roar. A Sherman takes a direct hit and explodes. Another tank throws a track and grinds to a halt, but the column keeps moving. Can't stop, won't stop, and then ... Open ground. Dwight sees American foxholes ahead. Paratroopers rising up, waving, some of them crying. He's done it. He's broken through to Bastogne. The paratroopers can't believe what they're seeing. After 4 days of being told no help was coming, that they were on their own, that they had to hold until they couldn't hold anymore, here are Sherman tanks rolling toward their lines. Battle-hardened men break down and weep. Officers who haven't slept in days just stand there, staring, unable to process that relief has actually arrived. A lieutenant from the 101st Airborne runs up to Cobra King. He climbs onto the hull and shouts up at Dwight, "Damn glad to see you." Those 4 words. After 4 days of siege, after the ultimatum, after nuts, after everything. The corridor is narrow, barely wide enough for 1 tank. German shells are already falling on both sides. But it's open. Bastogne is relieved. The phone call goes up the chain of command, from the front to Corps headquarters, from Corps to Army, from Army to Chafe, until finally George Patton picks up the phone himself. Eisenhower is in his office at SHAEF headquarters in Versailles. It's been 10 days since the German offensive began. 10 days of chaos, uncertainty, and mounting casualties. 10 days of wondering if his gamble on Patton would pay off. The duty officer announces the call. General Patton on the line. Sir. Eisenhower picks up. Ike, we're through to Bastogne. For words, Eisenhower's staff watches what happens next. First, his shoulders drop. The tension that's been building for days drains out of him. Then his eyes glisten. He turns away for a moment, composing himself. When he speaks again, his voice is thick. George... Say that again? We're through. The corridor's narrow, but it's open. 4th Armored made contact with the 101st at 1650 hours. We're pushing supplies through now. Congratulations, George. You did it. You actually did it. There's a pause, a moment of silence between 2 men who have known each other for over 2 decades, who have fought together, served together, struggled with each other. In that silence, everything unsaid passes between them. The frustrations, the controversies, the times Eisenhower defended Patton when he shouldn't have, the times Patton made Eisenhower's life impossible. None of it matters now. After a brief tactical discussion, Eisenhower hangs up. He sits in silence for a long moment. Then he turns to his staff and says something they'll never forget. "Gentlemen, George Patton has just accomplished something I wasn't sure was possible. He promised December 22nd and delivered December 26th. Given the weather and conditions, that's close enough to miraculous." Then Eisenhower does something his staff rarely sees. He smiles, a real smile, and he says, "Get me a message to the 101st. Tell them relief has arrived. Send my personal congratulations to General Patton and 3rd Army. They've just changed the entire complexion of this battle." But here's what you need to understand. This wasn't just military relief. This wasn't just tactical success. This moment represented something far more personal for Eisenhower. For over a year, he'd been defending Patton. after the slapping incident, after the loose comments to the press, after every controversy that should have ended Patton's career. Eisenhower had staked his own reputation on keeping Patton in command. If Patton failed at Bastogne, it wouldn't just be Patton's career that ended. It would be Eisenhower's too. That's why the relief was so profound. Patton hadn't just saved the 101st Airborne, he'd saved Eisenhower. In the days following the breakthrough, Eisenhower's private writings revealed the depth of his feelings. To his wife Mamie, he wrote, "I've spent so much time being frustrated with George, his ego, his controversies, his insubordination. I sometimes forget why I keep him in command," Bastogne reminded me. When the stakes are highest, George delivers. To General George Marshall, the Army Chief of Staff, Eisenhower was more analytical. Patton's operational execution was flawless, exactly the kind of aggressive, mobile warfare we need. His ability to anticipate this crisis and prepare contingency plans raises questions about how much autonomy commanders should have. He was right. We were wrong. But perhaps most revealing was what Eisenhower wrote in his personal diary. "George exhausts me. Managing him takes more energy than managing 3 normal commanders." But what he accomplished at Bastogne justified every frustration. The paratroopers owe their lives to George's speed and aggression. I can't fire a man who saves battles. I can't even reprimand him when he's just proven his methods work. This is the impossible position George puts me in. He's right too often for me to change him, but difficult too often for me to enjoy working with him. The relief of Bastogne changed everything between these two men. Not the friction that would never go away, but the balance. Eisenhower finally understood what he had in Patton. A weapon that was worth the cost of managing. From that day forward, Eisenhower gave Patton more freedom than he gave any other commander. More ambitious objectives, more resources, less micromanagement. He had learned something at Bastogne. Sometimes you have to trust difficult people. Sometimes the impossible requires someone who doesn't know the meaning of the word. In a private meeting with Patton weeks later, Eisenhower said something that captured their entire relationship. "George Bastogne bought you credibility that will last the rest of this war. Don't waste it. You've proven you can do the impossible when it matters. Now prove you can follow orders when they don't suit your preferences." Patton nodded. For once, he had nothing to add. After the war, when both men had time to reflect, Eisenhower wrote something in his memoir that summed up Bastogne perfectly. "General Patton's relief of Bastogne vindicated my decision to retain him despite numerous controversies. His rapid movement through terrible weather, his aggressive attack, and his breakthrough to the surrounded garrison demonstrated operational excellence at the highest level. History will judge Patton by his battlefield achievements, and Bastogne stands among his finest." And decades later, in private correspondence, Eisenhower was even more direct. "George and I had a complicated relationship. He frustrated me constantly. But when I got that phone call on December 26, 1944, hearing we're through to Bastogne, I felt profound relief and gratitude. In that moment, all the frustrations didn't matter. George had saved those paratroopers and possibly saved the entire campaign. That's what I remember most. Not the controversies, but the moment when he delivered exactly when it mattered most." Here's something to think about. Do great achievements excuse difficult behavior? Let me know what you think in the comments. The story of Bastogne isn't just about military tactics. It's about the impossible balance between genius and discipline, between brilliance and insubordination, between saving the day and being impossible to work with. Patton was right. He saw what was coming when others didn't. He prepared when others didn't, and he delivered when others couldn't. But he was also exhausting, controversial, nearly career-ending on multiple occasions. Think about it. This was a man who had been nearly sent home in disgrace for slapping soldiers suffering from combat fatigue. A man who couldn't keep his mouth shut to the press. A man who drove his superiors to distraction with his arrogance and his refusal to follow the chain of command. And yet, when the crisis came, he was the only one ready. Eisenhower's genius wasn't just in commanding armies. It was in recognizing that sometimes you need difficult people. Sometimes the only person who can do the impossible is the person who refuses to accept that it's impossible. And sometimes you just have to hold your breath and trust them. That's what Eisenhower did on December 19, 1944, in that freezing conference room in Verdun. And 7 days later, those 4 words made it all worth it. We're through to Bastogne. If this story of impossible odds and difficult leadership resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. Every week, we uncover untold moments from World War II. But Bastogne was just one battle. One moment in a war full of impossible decisions. The Battle of the Bulge would rage for another month. Nearly 90,000 American casualties. Almost 100,000 German. The last great offensive of the Third Reich, broken not just by supplies and firepower, but by the courage of men who refused to give up. Patton would go on to race across Germany, capturing more territory faster than any American commander in history. He would liberate concentration camps, capture cities, and force the surrender of entire German armies. But he would never escape the controversies, never stop being difficult. And when he died in a car accident just months after the war ended, Eisenhower would call it the loss of an irreplaceable warrior. In our next video, we're diving into another question that changed history. What happened to the German commanders who launched the Ardennes offensive? The ones who came so close to splitting the Allied armies. Some of them faced trials, some of them escaped, and one of them had a secret that wasn't discovered for decades. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Until then, this has been History of World War II. Thanks for watching.